Professor Tim Wilson is a shining example of what all we humans aspire to be. Equal parts mad storyteller, quick wit, incredibly charming, and also extremely empathetic and caring. This is part 1, so don't miss next week's episode for the exciting conclusion of my chat with the amazing Tim. Professor Tim Wilson, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Greg.
It is my absolute pleasure to have you. So I want to tell you really quickly.
How did you come across me?
Exactly where I was going. You're a mind reader, which is another thing I wanted to talk to you about. Your amazing intuitions. So I watch not a lot of television, but the television I do watch happens to be British TV.
Really?
Yeah, I'm bored. I'm absolutely bored to tears with American TV.
Are you a Doctor Who fan?
I used to be. Yeah, so I used to do a lot more.
Right, in the days of Tom Thingamy.
Well, I was more on the reboot stuff. So.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh, I find the reboot rather distressing in some ways, but I have a nodding acquaintance with Russell T Davies, and I feel I should be supportive of him. And he and I were both at university in Oxford at the same time, so I don't remember meeting him then. But I was in and out of his college. I was tutored in his college at one point by a very strange man who looked like Rasputin. And he used to sit on the floor, and I used to have to sit in an armchair. And it's very intimidating when you're looking down at your tutor. I think it'd be even more intimidating if you were a girl. And he did eventually have an affair with a girl who I think had her tutorials just before me or just after me. And my tutorials got shorter and shorter as a result. I think his liaison got more and more entertaining than clearly my essays about patristics. But yeah.
So I found you.
So that was my experience of going into Russell T Davis's college.
You may not have remembered him, but I guarantee if he ever came across you, he remembers you. So I wouldn't worry about that.
Oh, Russell?
Yeah.
No. We exchanged messages, and he's just produced a really good show called "It's a Sin," which is great. So I had to send him a little note about that.
I saw that come out. I haven't watched it yet, though.
It's so good. It's slightly harrowing, but it's beautifully, to deal with serious subjects with a sort of legerdemain, with a sort of lightness of touch. It's what we all aspire to do.
It looked a bit heavy, so I was waiting. I was kind of girding my loins before I watched it.
It's really not heavy.
Okay.
That's the extraordinary thing about it. It's light, but it deals with heavy themes, and this I think is one of the things, and one of the reasons why I hate the SAT sort of test, the SAT test in the States, because they seem to think that the mark of being clever is that you can dissect a sort of polysyllabic word. The mark of being clever is to be able to present something which is polysyllabic in words of one syllable, to be able to present a complex situation as entertainment and as simple. And certainly that's what I would try and do. And also not to poo-poo the ordinary. The ordinary is what will continue. The extraordinary will disappear, I'm afraid. But the ordinary, today's skid marks are tomorrow's history. It's sorry to return to the scatological theme. But if you think this is, you go up to Hadrian's Wall and you're examining somebody's poo. Or you're in Pompeii. The things that we don't consider important. These are the things that define us, actually, and so that I'm afraid is ephemeral television, like reality TV, which I sort of turned my nose up for years at. And I wouldn't be seen dead watching Big Brother. Now I see it as my moral duty.
Well, you were talking about simple things, and that's probably one of the things I really enjoy about watching British television is that your simple things are foreign to me. They're exotic, but at the same time comforting, right? To see the routine and the differences. And I love to see how you guys do things.
That's it. It's the routine and the differences. Precisely.
Yeah, it fascinates me.
Precisely.
Something else you talked about was explaining concept topics in simple terms. I love that. So in my other life, I'm what do you call it? Like a sales engineer for a technical company. So
Oh my goodness! What sort of technical things do you do?
So I work for a company called Red Hat, and I do automation. So
there we are.
So what I do is I bridge the gap. They call folks like me, they call them unicorns. We are extremely technical, but we can still talk to normal humans in a normal way, and take complex concepts and break them down. And honestly, I think in pictures. Like I always envision things in images, and so that's what I do. I just take complex concepts and make a picture.
We're actually in my office, and there's pictures everywhere. Pictures and scribbles literally on every bit of wall space, I think. That's how I think too.
Yeah, but I think that's a rare ability, is to take something complex and actually make it digestible for just mere humans.
Yeah, but I wish people would do that before they packed things up in boxes, so that when you unpack, you have no idea what they are, and so much of that rubbish is legal anyway, and people don't make a distinction between explanation and legal protection, and you get the whole lot all in one spiel, and it's incomprehensible, and then it's often not written in a language and it's translated, and translators, as we know, are all traitors.
Translators are traitors. I like that.
Yeah, I think Dante said that, or somebody said that about Dante, definitely. Traditory.
That's fascinating. So to go back to where I met you, well, I mean, I didn't really meet you. I guess I was introduced. Well, I felt like to be honest with you, I felt like I met your spirit, the part of you that. So anyway, we watch a lot of British television. My wife stumbled on The Circle season 2, and she's watching that, and I'm kind of in between. So like in this pandemic we find ourselves in, I work from home, and so I'm in between the kitchen and whatnot, and so I catch a little bit of this, and I see this fellow on there, this rakishly handsome middle-aged man on there, amazing beard, huge cat. And you have this spirit and this charm. It is magnetic. So the first time I heard you laugh, I said out loud to my wife, I said, I need to talk to this guy. And I don't know, putting it out into the world, it manifested into reality. And here we are maybe like 2 or 3 weeks later, and I'm talking to you. But you just have this charm, this charisma. You know what else really drew me to you? Was whenever you would make a new discovery, or you'd make a hypothesis and it would ring true, you would have this childlike glee about you that was just undeniable, and I loved it. And I thought, I need to get this guy in my life somehow. I need to talk to this guy. It's amazing.
But I think that is me. There was a point in the show when I think you begin a show like that, and you sort of what's expected of you, and you've got to be sort of you. And you in front of the camera, and you sort of pretend to be you. Mm-hmm. And there was a point when I had a sort of spat with Richard Madeley, who was a television personality, and he was pretending actually to be Judy, and Judy is his wife, who's just lovely. I eventually got a hug from Judy, which that's everybody's wish, to be hugged by Judy, and by Richard, and Richard was horrible in the show. Really horrible. And he was being persuaded to be involved in this very, very nasty practical joke. A Venus spas. Like when you watch Mozart's opera Così fan tutte. I am always told I pronounce that wrongly, by the way. And I directed it, so I perpetuated the wrong pronunciation. But it should be all women, not all. And I come quite close to saying all men, and it's wrong. But Così fan tutte, and where the men pretend to be each other's boyfriends and to seduce each other's girlfriend, and they pretend to be Albanians. I've been to Albania. I know it. In the opera, they say the only thing that is Albanian is they wear moustaches. So if you put on a fake moustache, you're looking Albanian. And at the end, when they've managed to prove that a girlfriend's unfaithful, then they manage to sort of wave a magic wand and everything is okay. It cannot be okay. That level of practical joke just cannot be sustained. People are hurt in a practical joke. I was hurt. I spent a day crying. And that experience sort of catapulted me into a sort of devil-may-care sort of belief, really. And from that point on, I found myself becoming me and being comfortable to be me on television. And I was really comfortable. I felt utterly at home. I felt more at home there than I probably do in real life, being at home. And I just felt liberated. It was odd. You know, cameras everywhere is odd. And when I came off the show, I was sort of waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning in hotels and singing the entire book of The Sound of Music from beginning to end. And just I got complaints because that's what I did in the show. You never saw that, but in the show I'd wake up and they wouldn't let me get up, and they'd say you have to remain in bed. So I had to remain in bed until the lights came on. So during that 2 hours, while I was in bed and not allowed to get up, I'd go through an entire musical.
That's crazy. From
first song through to last one. I did 33, and and I managed 33 puns for Bay, which started with Baywatch, and it caught on so much. There was actually a person in the production company, I believe, whose job was to be on a camera to monitor where Bay was, and he was called the Baywatch
The Baywatcher.
After the first pun, I think.
Hilarious.
Which was Baywatch.
So, you know, I was watching that, and I remember. So we haven't made it all the way through the season. Obviously, through doing some research, I know what it ended up.
Oh, have you got to the end of the season yet?
No, we are at episode 13, I think. But I know what happens.
Yes, no spoilers.
No. I was gonna say through the research, I already figured out kind of what happens.
Right. I've only seen to episode 4, I think. And then I fell asleep. But I kept freeze framing because I wanted to draw pictures of various people. I drew a very nice picture of Cy, who's an absolute angel. And you didn't get all my conversations with Cy, as they were lovely. They were a little bit niche. They were all about tractors and combine harvesters and cow manure. But because we've both been slightly brought up on farms, so we understood each other. So when he was blocked, or when I blocked him, and he wanted to come and see me, I think production was rather confused by this because they hadn't told that story. But his big relationship in the circle was with me. I think they wanted a big relationship to be with one of the girls, and it wasn't. He wanted to check that I was real, and I think the circle, the only thing they could do then was get him to say, "Why did you block me?" And I don't think he even managed to do that because we just got on so well. Yeah. And when I saw a little bit of playback, and I saw him on the sofa, and I believe he defends me to Richard Madeley. But when I saw him on the sofa, I just thought, you know, that man's comfortable, and he'd be a really good guest at any time on television. He's just at home with himself.
You know, it's funny. Something I've noticed, and it seemed like it really was something you were looking for, was shared experiences, like finding things in common with folks. And I remember reading at one point that like when people go on vacation, like if I'm an American and I go overseas somewhere and I'm touring around, at some point, if I meet other Americans, you'll end up forming this camaraderie, right? It's like you try and find these similarities. And I think that's just kind of in our human nature, right? It's like trying to find familiarity because there's comfort there.
But I mean, sadly, when you're traveling around, you often you often bond with people who are quite inappropriate simply because you have a common language. Right. You know, I can think of so many people that I became friends with when I was living in Greece and in Russia, who, you know, really I should have steered well clear of them.
But I think you could see that unfold in the show, right? Folks trying to find common ground, right? To, they're out there on an island, and you wanna tether yourself to something.
Yes, it's true, but you can find common ground with anybody, really. And I think there's more than that. I was sold the show as a show that celebrated friendship. And then I was told it was all about popularity. I thought, well, that's not so different. And I don't think I don't think I ever quite reconciled myself to the idea that it was a sort of, it was a proto Survivor show, and it was all about what would you do to win the £100,000. Well, nothing, frankly. And I remember when we got towards the end of the show, they kept asking, well, what would you do with the £100,000? I said, well, nothing. I mean, if I won it, I wouldn't keep it very long. My partner would probably spend it. I have no idea. I'm not interested. And that remains the case. I mean, it's probably why I'm as poor as a church mouse, because I don't have that great interest.
Money's not a big motivator for me either.
No, I in some ways it's a motivator for me, because the sort of projects I want to do cost money, but the projects I want to do are never going to make me money. I want to do animated opera. I want to do a documentary about Edward Lear. I want to go on stage in the West End and in Broadway. But none of that's going to make me any money. I mean, really, my primary objective at the moment ought to be to want to do lots of television presenting. I'm happy to do that, but it's not. I wouldn't kill somebody for that. I would seriously consider daggers at dawn if somebody dangled a West End role in front of me. Tevye, if I were a rich man, how wonderful that would be. Or Zorba! Zorba by Kander and Ebb. Great. Or I'd even do Panto. I'd love to do Panto.
Would you?
You don't have Panto in the States. I know, you're missing something. It's one of the things that, frankly, Julie Andrews should have brought it with her when she came over. But she didn't. I don't understand how she managed to miss that one. Angela Lansbury could have brought it over. There we are.
Do you think that would kind of emotionally feed you, doing the television presenting thing? Because you'd still be seen, you'd still be entertaining and performing.
I'd love it. I mean, I'd thought for a long time that performance was no longer my thing. I thought that I'd moved behind the camera, partly because, I have a partner who was a torture victim, and it's very difficult to be a performer because you're pulling focus all the time, and you then become the one who needs the support, and that's difficult. But I think we've been together 20 odd years, and he survived just about my time in the circle. So maybe it is time. Maybe it is time. And I'd forgotten how much I feel alive in front of an audience.
Well, I looked at your history. So if you
Oh, really?
if you read your LinkedIn profile, just for example, it reads like a career criminal's rap sheet. You have done so much stuff. And
Really?
I've noticed that a lot of it is education. And when you really, I think, boil down education, there's kind of a couple of things, but one is it's very performative, right? You're in front of people, and you're, these young minds, you're giving them information, and then every so often you'll see this light bulb spark, and that's, to me, that's the equivalent of doing a live performance and getting the applause, right?
It is performance, and that's the point. And I think education increasingly is moving away from that. It's not a very safe form of education, and most people can't do it, and most people fail in that. So it's not being encouraged. And I've been teaching teachers how to teach, and it's wonderful to be able to pass on those skills, particularly to teachers who are teaching in primary school. I've been doing that in Russia. And you have a whole box of tricks. And I can give people that box of tricks, and I can make it work. But when you go beyond that, So my big thing is I'm really interested in text and sort of research. You would say research.
Hmm.
It's just emphasis, but yeah, I'm really interested in research, and I'm really interested in sort of defending your point of view and all that sort of stuff. Um, but I think modern teaching is about imparting uh, little bits of information, and I'm not so keen on that. And I'm also um, I'm worried about the modern formula of teaching. Um, Much of it came from my university, so from Vygotsky. So you know, I feel I'm involved in it, but I don't like teacher training as it manifests in many countries, and I don't like the product. I think it's very formulaic. And if I were a student today in a school, I'd be bored out of my mind, and I wouldn't get anywhere.
I think, when you, and obviously I'm not well versed on this stuff, but when you say give small bits of information, I kind of like that sometimes. Whenever I'm doing a project, I want the Cliff's Notes. I don't want you to give me, it's not like for me, when I'm doing something, I don't want it to be like baking where you have a very formulaic method you follow to complete everything.
Exactly.
I like to fill in the blanks
Exactly.
myself. I like to do the discoveries. I like to have the highlights.
And so yeah, you want to you want to you want to teach pupils the nuts and bolts about how to do something, and then give them a project to actually do it.
Yeah.
Rather than this is what you've got to learn, and let's go through the illusion of experience. Let's flatter you into thinking that you are discovering this yourself through your own experience. They're not. This is all a lie, and I don't like that sort of deceit. Yes, I want you to have the experience. In order to have the experience, I will tell you how you bake a cake. Now go off. Here's as many ingredients as you possibly want. Go and bake something spectacular, because you now have the tools to do that. And the same thing with writing an essay. This is how you write an essay. There are rules. Let me teach you those rules. Mm-hmm. You're wasting your time if you write something and I say, that's lovely, darling, and keep chipping at it. So much easier. Give you the rules, and now, go and make it work.
Yeah. I like
present something which is really interesting.
I like the idea of telling people, here's all the ingredients. You're going to fail a whole bunch, but you're going to learn along the way, and come back to me when you have something amazing.
Yeah. But I would still say there are some rules.
For sure. Yeah.
There are some. And they're not about safety. They're about, if you want this to work well, this is the way I would do it. You may find there's a better way of doing it, in which case show me. But this is the way that I would do it, and this is the way that is this works. When you're looking at animation, which is the other half of my life, you analyze movement, and there are just things that work,
mm-hmm.
and you can go back, you can reinvent the wheel, but actually, why bother? Because the wheel is a perfectly serviceable tool, and if you don't follow the rules that work, and that were invented in a very short space of time, by the way, they were discovered in the end of the 1930s by the Disney studio, and they've never been bettered. Never been bettered. Now, I would hope that I've introduced, or that I'm in the process of introducing, one new facial expression, but that's as much as I can possibly hope to do. I can tinker with the presentation, but if it comes to making a character walk, there is only one way of doing it, and you analyze, that the passing position and the point of contact. You can put the leg in all manner of positions, as long as you're consistent. You can move the camera around if you're clever, but you have to follow the rules. There are rules.
I've watched several of your animations on YouTube.
Oh,
Yeah. Why do you act so surprised at everything? You're a very interesting
Well,
guy. Why wouldn't somebody want to do a little bit of in-depth research on you?
I'm not used to being the subject of research.
All right. Oh, well,
But thank you very much.
yeah, for sure. So I've watched several of your animations, and a lot of them, well, actually, all of the ones I've watched surround education. So it's mostly you giving a lecture or your deep kind of thoughts on something, and then the animation is supplemental. And I really like that because, you know, a lot of people learn in different ways, absorb information in different ways. And I think you did one on, and I'm going to butcher this, was it Plato's Cave? Is that?
Oh, God, no, yeah, it's a long time ago. And
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah. And so I can still see the imagery of your animations. I may not be able to remember all the words, but I can still remember that. And so I can piece together the plot. And I thought that was such a great device. Like, I loved how that carried. You know what's so funny is everybody I've talked to, when you distill it down, they're storytellers. And I love an amazing storyteller.
That's exactly it.
You do it better than just about anybody I've ever seen because, for one, I have no idea what's going to come out of your mouth next. And two, whenever it does come out, it's so charming that I can't wait for the next thing to come out. So you kind of, you kill me every time.
I'm always worried that it's sort of, that I'm going to lose the plot halfway through, and you're going to have a sort of, you know, when you're talking to somebody, you've always got that moment, and you leave the conversation, particularly in these sort of things like sort of YouTube and podcasts and so on, and you switch off and you think, well, that was okay. And you think, oh no, I failed to finish this story. It's the French have got a really nice expression for it, if I can remember it. It's called l'esprit d'escalier, and you think, yeah, I'm never going to use this. I promise you, you'll be using this forever afterwards. It's the spirit of the stairs, l'esprit d'escalier. Because in the French salon culture in the late 18th century, early 19th century, the salons were on the first floor. You know, not the ground floor, the next floor up. So you have to go up a staircase to get to the big salon where the ladies, not the horizontal ladies, but the ladies would be waiting. With that frisson of delight, and you would then tell your stories, and you would be scintillating and gorgeous. And then as you leave, and you're going back down the staircase to the exit, you suddenly think, I wish I'd said. And Oscar Wilde famously said, oh, I wish I'd said blah blah blah. And his friend says, you will, Oscar, you will. If you're the author of your own history, if you manage to write your own autobiography or memoir, of course you can fiddle around with l'esprit d'escalier, but it's a lovely idea. It's a lovely idea. I think
fantastic.
You know, the things we forget, the things we sort of the half told stories, and certainly when you sort of get excited and you're telling a story, you suddenly, oh, I have to add this bit, and I have to add this bit. And you've suddenly realized, oh, I've got a story inside a story inside a story inside a story. Have I finished the main story? Have I actually told you the reason why I'm telling you all this sort of rubbish? And have I actually finished why I'm actually telling you why I launched into this pan of nonsense, why this digression was relevant at all, and or do I just come across as a complete fruitcake?
I keep notes. I always have a notepad
Better than me,
because I'll come up with an idea. If I don't write it down, it's gone.
Absolutely.
And all I can see are the vapors. I can't actually grab a hold of them. It drives me crazy.
Normally, I have a notebook by my bed. Yeah, I'm a great fan of writing things down, because if you don't, they're gone.
So tell me about your relationship with animation and how you decided to pair that with kind of your education, your speeches and stuff.
Oh, I didn't. Pure chance. When I was 11, I saw a wonderful animated film, a half-hour animated film of A Christmas Carol by a man called Richard Williams, who is the god of animation. And at the time he was working in London, I wrote him a fan letter, and he invited me up to London. He got an Oscar then, so I was right. And we sort of kept in touch. And I always wanted to be an animator, and I had a really tough time with art at school. I had uh, a horrendous art teacher who used to bully me and humiliate me, and I was unfortunately very gifted. Um, so I so he would ask us all to do something, and I would have finished it before he'd even finished explaining what we were doing. If it was a drawing, you know, I could draw you in an instant. And what was lovely about being on the circle was I suddenly had the time to get back to drawing, and I did a lot of drawing while I was on the circle. And so since then, I found I've got that capability again. And for a short while after the circle, I was churning out drawings and putting them up on Instagram.
Yeah, I
and
saw a
stuff.
lot on Instagram. They're amazing.
I've stopped doing a lot of that because I've got quite busy reviving animation projects, which I've had going for about 6 years or so. I've got one which I'm trying desperately to finish now. At the moment, it's being interrupted by a thing for the National Health Service, which isn't paying me, so it's a sort of freebie. Some whiteboard stuff, but I've got I did a two-part talk which started about 7 years ago on the history of the music halls, not the musical, the music halls. So the music halls were these extraordinary popular entertainment centres, and from the history of the music halls, we get a lot of the legislation that surrounds theatre globally. You know, when you go into a theatre, you find all the seats are screwed onto the floor. That's because of the legislation which came up because the music halls were constantly burning down, and people in their scurry to get out were being blocked by furniture. So they were being roasted alive by the seats that they had originally been sitting on.
Right.
And similarly, you know, food and drink is now sold in bars outside the main auditorium. That's part, and the safety curtain falls in the middle of a performance at some point by law. And one of the last things actually to come out of that was the development of a union for variety artists, which in Britain and America is called the Equity Union, and it's now the thing which runs theatre really. And it's got airs and graces which never originally intended. I mean, it was for people who juggled balls really, to give them protection. And for example, if you go on a reality TV show, you have no union. You have no representation. Right. If you have no theatre agent, and it's very difficult to get these things. And I think somebody who is good enough for primetime television should be professionally represented. And I also think they should be professionally paid. I've had this discussion with people about Survivor, and apparently Survivor on one or two of its recent series has paid the participants. And I think, great. And they said, but they're not so good because they don't have this desire for the money pot. Well, I wouldn't have the desire for the money pot anyway. I mean, I don't do greed. You know, I just think it's professional.
So where did the idea to do this animation on the music halls actually come from? Like, what sparked that, you think?
Because I think that's popular entertainment, and I think popular entertainment informs us and guides us, and that's what television is. You know, you can dress it up and call it Shakespeare. Shakespeare did, but Shakespeare was just writing the rubbish of his day. And today we think this is great literature. You know, and animation, what Disney was producing in the 1930s, is great art. And there was a person who saw this right at the time in the 1940s. There was a book by Field called The Art of Walt Disney, and he really put his finger on something. I think Disney has become formulaic, and I think certainly going into 3D, everything looks like Barbie. On speed, but Rapunzel, Barbie with hair, but it's, you know, behind that I think there is art, but the advantage of these drawings that move is that you really see the artistry. It's not real. It's at a move from reality. It's utter remove from reality, like the Greek icon. You go all the way back to Plato. So the music hall is all about the ephemeral, the throwaway, which becomes great art. And you're looking at people who have dedicated their life to the minute or the 2 minutes that they are standing in front of you performing. And I think the dedication needs to be saluted. You know, the person who can lie on her back and juggle sheep or something, you know, or toss fire in all directions. You just think they do that so effortlessly, and that effortlessness. I was working with a fellow the other day who we're working on a song for a piece of animation, which will eventually, I hope, go somewhere else. But the song we chose has got a high G at the end, which is held for about 6 bars. And I know how it's been sung in the past, and it's big effort. And this person just hits that G with such ease and such comfort. And I just think, oh my goodness, I can just go to sleep immediately. I mean, narcolepsy is not so far away. Right. And I think it's just a joy to hear that ease. Now, you go back, as ever, I always come back to Julie Andrews. I always think that Julie Andrews ought to be, if you're going to do a new edition of Stanislavski's book, you know, how an actor prepares and all that sort of stuff, he's got 3. You ought to have Julie Andrews in different positions on each front cover, because she is a consummate professional. She is what our business should be. Yes, I know there are great Shakespearean actors, but Julie Andrews just does the lot. And she has this wonderful thing which she talks about in, I think, her first memoir, Home. And she got it from somewhere else, so she attributes this to somebody else. It's just the charm of the lady. She says, the difference between an amateur and a professional. What is the difference? The difference is very simple. An amateur rehearses until they get it right, and a professional rehearses until they cannot get it wrong. And you just think then to your fire juggler and your lady with the balls, and a person juggling knives, and the lion tamer, and you think, yeah, that's it. And night after night you go in and you sing the same song and you hit that high G. Yeah, that's it. And when you're performing on stage, and you've done sort of just over a month, I think, in my experience, the first week you're terrified about forgetting your lines. The second week you're coasting. The third week you start experimenting. And the fourth week, suddenly something comes over you and you're just there. And you realize that you are the one person in the theatre who probably is not absolutely engaged in the story that you are telling. You could be thinking about almost anything, and it's become part of your body language. And you can go in and out of it. And it's that point of professionalism where you are the person who is actually in control. So much in control that you can move away from it, because you've rehearsed so well that it is part of your being. It's like walking. When we're walking, and this is like animation, walking is the hardest thing we ever do in our lives. That's why children fall over and cry so much. It's the hardest thing to do, unless you have COVID and you have to learn how to breathe again, I suppose. But otherwise, walking is really the hardest thing we do as human beings. And yet, most of the time, people don't take me to one side and say, "Oh my God, Tim, I love the way you walked." They tend not to do that to me, in my experience. Sometimes they criticize the way I walk, but they don't congratulate me on this incredibly difficult feat. And this is what happens when you've rehearsed enough. It becomes so easy that you just do it. And you don't think about it. Other people don't think about it. And you don't need a lot of fireworks, but you are doing something amazing.
Something I've heard is that whenever you're in the middle of something like that, you fall back on your greatest level of practice, right? It's like the thing that you've practiced and practiced, and when your brain turns off, you fall back to that level. And so when you were talking about once you get to that fourth week where you're performing, but you're you're like very aware of what you're doing. That makes me think of like lucid dreaming, right? Where you realize you're in a dream and you can control it. So it makes me wonder,
of course.
do you think you get greater satisfaction when you're on the stage, you're performing, and yet you're able to actually look at your audience and see how you're affecting them? Do you?
Yeah, I think it's possible. Of course, the danger is when you start looking at yourself, is you do, oh, aren't I brilliant? And then you're like the lady who's walking down the street, and the heel goes in the cobbles and sort of topples over, and then inevitably she's going to get up. Well, I know I do anyway. Inevitably, when I walked into a lamppost, I get up and I say, "I'm all right," as if anybody cares. I love that moment of stuff. You've really got to be careful of that, because it's a killer, absolute killer.
So and I'm trying to kind of walk through the world occasionally through my emotions to sort of like feel my way through. This is neither here nor there, but at an early age, I learned to turn that stuff off. And so as an adult, I'm learning to turn it back on. And it's interesting to kind of navigate my way through that. And so I've done a couple of weddings. Like I've married people a few times. And
very good.
The last time I did it, when I was up on stage, I don't know, I think what like Americans call it, I got into the zone where it just felt like I was riding a wave, and I would get to a funny part and everybody would just laugh. And then I would bring it to a more emotional side, and I could actually see people in the crowd cry. And then, you bring it all home with a crescendo and make them all laughing. And
but you have to be really careful that you don't divorce yourself from the reality.
Yeah.
This is a problem. And so I think when you're performing, that fourth week is very dangerous, because you want to keep bringing yourself back into the reality. It's not you performing, it's Henry VIII or Henry IV, or it's a character. You are the character. You have to keep telling yourself this, otherwise the character will just be. It is you sort of being self-indulgent. We're back to Genesis 38, we don't want to make one of those films.
But I guess in that instance it was just me, so I don't know. I guess it was okay. In that instance, it was probably okay. But there was. I don't know. I found this, and I've hit that a few times in my life, but it's only in these performative settings where I can say something, do something, and I can evoke real emotion in other people. And that was powerful in a way that I had never anticipated it. And it satisfied me in a way that I had never expected it to.
You have charisma. And charisma is simply another version of spirit, grace. It's whatever you want to call it, and then let's go to a Latin word. Charisma is Greek. Go to a Latin word, spiro, and inspiro. This is the word to inspire, and literally that is what you're doing. So if you have charisma, you are inspiring. People are breathing in. To spiro is to breathe, and breathe in, and other people are breathing in your spirit. That's incredibly bewitching. The point is that you have that has to be a mutual experience. It can't just be constantly giving. So you've got to breathe in as well. You've got to be inspired by their response. Otherwise it's a dead experience, and it's a really exhausting experience. And I think this is where sort of emotional what is it? Emotional intelligence comes from. Emotional intelligence is a clever way of basically talking about communication and awareness on a non-vocal level, and I think that's what one aims for.
Every time I have one of these,
and I think it helps when you have. I think it helps when you have small children. I think it helps when you have small animals or big animals, because your communication has to be non-verbal, or your verbal communication is limited, and so you find a better way. There is a better way.
Better way, yeah. Whenever I have these conversations, I hope for one thing, and that's to pick up something that I can carry with me. I've learned that over time I am just an amalgamation of things I've heard, right? Little witticisms or whatever. And the
and you
idea
make them
of
yours.
inspiration, of breathing in, that was so visceral to me. Like, I think I got chills when you said that. Just the imagery of breathing in somebody's spirit. That is amazing. That is something I'm going to carry with me the rest of my life. That is that's phenomenal. I love that.
Well, and then you say inspiration is all about art. Art is linked to inspiration. Well, yeah, dissect that word. Inspiration is just breathing. So suddenly you've made that very simplistic. You know, art is breathing,
Pulling it in.
and great theatre is breathing. Great art is breathing. It's just being. It's just being. And if so, when you come to the sort of reality TV, and I'm very critical about it, by the way. I'm critical enough to have made enemies, I think.
Never in your life.
Oh, absolutely, believe me. Yeah. Oh my goodness, we're caught up in the dressing gown. Yep. No, it's called a claw. It's called a claw. Some people call it a talon. Right, claw. There we are. So, reality TV. What is it actually doing? It's not real, as we know.
Yeah.
We can throw that one away immediately. This is a misnomer. But it's like a really good drama. And when you've got a really good drama, when you've got when you've got an episode of Dynasty and Joan Collins is doing her bit, and you've got to wheel these out every week, so you get the best talent, and the best talent is somebody who can perform and learn their lines and deliver on cue, ideally first take, because you don't want to waste too much time. So how do you do this? You've got your script, and you have to learn it and learn it and learn it, and rehearse and rehearse and rehearse until it becomes real. That's one way of doing it. So what you're looking for is a level of reality and performance, which most people find really difficult to get. When most people read a text, it sounds wooden. When Joan Collins reads a text, you just want to close your eyes and drift into honey. It's a joy. Now, the other way of doing this is like when you do a recording. I spent a lot of time when I was living in Greece doing recordings for talking books and teaching people how to do English. And they would say to me the night before, "Would you like us to send you the script?" I say, "For God's sake, no. What's the point of that? It's just paper. I'd much prefer to go into the studio and see it for the first time. Would you like to rehearse?" "No. Turn the microphones on and record, because you might get something you can use first time round. And that first time that you do it, you may make a mistake, but you're going to have a life to it that you're never going to be able to recapture again until you've learnt it." So what reality TV has done is to find a cast, a company, people like me, who they think will deliver the goods, put them in an environment where they are likely to say certain things and to create that drama. And then you, as a good director or a good producer, you control that. So I would say, for the most part, most reality TV has already got a script. They know where they're going. I may not, but they do.
For sure.
If they don't, they have the ability to make drama out of what they see, which is harder. So you've got those two sides. Number one, you follow a script. Number two, you make drama out of what is already there, in which case you have to look at a lot of footage. But in both cases, the dramatic storytelling is taken away from the actor and is put in the hands of the editor. But the actor is doing the same thing that they would do if they'd sat down for 2 or 3 weeks and learnt their lines. It's just all that hard work is being moved from the actor to the editor. And that is reality TV. And it's got nothing to do with trying to win a prize. That's a different job. That's called a competition. Now, many reality TVs want a formula in order to tell their drama story. So they do it through the form of a competition. They might be doing it as a detective fiction. It's the same sort of thing. What Alfred Hitchcock would have called a MacGuffin. What are you looking for? I'm looking for the £100,000 prize, or I'm looking for the $1 million. Sorry about the accent.
No, that was pretty amazing American. I like it.
Is it? No,
like a 1920s gangster? Is that what you're going for?
Yeah, when I try an American accent, I always tend to go back into the 1920s, and I think, oh my God, Tim, stop it, stop it! You're either going into the 1920s, or you're going to be banging on a soapbox like Elmer Gantry or something, and Burt Lancaster, eat your heart out. So I wish I could do the sort of soft, television American, the sort of Boston accent, which Robin Williams had, and then I could do a sort of complete. I could do the complete film. I could do the "Oh no, dear, Mrs. Doubtfire," and then I could do the man part as well. But I just need some help with that. There's a musical of Mrs. Doubtfire.
I did not.
Yeah, it was one of the things which was killed off by COVID. Not terribly good music, but if somebody presented that to me, I would think seriously about removing the beard. And oh, it's just a hot flush, dear.
All right, Tim. Well, if you wanted folks to interact with you rather out on the internet, how would you have them do that? What's your preferred method?
Oh, Instagram is very good. Doesn't earn me any money, but it's so easy to access. And the best way of doing that is Professor_Tim_Wilson. And Twitter, I'm learning how to tweet.
There you are.
Yeah, there we are. I'm learning how to tweet. I've been on Twitter for a little bit longer, actually, because I did some political stuff, and I set up Twitter for that. And that's Prof_Tim_Wilson. And then I've got a blog, which is animate-tim.com, where you get some serious stuff, and some drawings. They come together. And what else? There's a website called zontalfilmslimited.com. Or is it Zontal Films? I think it's zontalfilms.com.
Okay.
Zontal is my partner's name. It's Z-O-N, you say Z-O-N-T-U-L-F-I-L-M-S. And Zontal is a southern Turkish name, so and it comes from Syriac, ancient Syriac. It means high mountain. So Jesus, who would have spoken a form of ancient Syriac, which we call Aramaic, would have said, "Come on, mates, let's go up the mountain," and then there would be a transfiguration and various other wonderful things, So they would have all been using my partner's name, which I find rather entertaining. So Zontal Films.
And Zontal Films, you also do that on YouTube, right?
Yeah, so on YouTube you look up Zontal Film as ZONTULFILMS Ltd Limited, and you'll find that on YouTube. And YouTube is the preferred thing because if I like increasing my numbers on YouTube, but yeah, it's quite nice to increase numbers on Instagram, but it doesn't have much financial reward.
Excellent. Well, again, Tim, thank you.
And people should tell me on Instagram and on YouTube particularly what they want me to talk about, and I'll talk about it.
I've noticed you've been pressing people to send you more things to talk about. I love that. So
yeah, happily. I'll talk about the carburetors if you want me to. I know nothing. I don't know how to drive. I was a wizard on a Massey Ferguson tractor when I was little. About the age of 5, I ploughed a very straight line, but I didn't know how to switch off, so I had to have somebody to switch to make my tractor stop.
That's not a flex. I hear from a lot of people. I can hoe a straight line in a tractor. It's pretty impressive. You should put that on the LinkedIn. Add that to the resume.
I think if I was talking about hoeing, I think I would get into dreadful.
Oh, okay. Tim, well, thank you, and thanks to all the listeners, and we'll see you guys next time.